Sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Grant Subcommittee meeting of January 27, 2025. We have quorum present in the room. We have Councillor Crutch, Councillor Francis. Online, we have Councillor Maureen Wilson. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. A reminder that all electronic devices to be switched to the non-audible function during committee meetings. And our first agenda item is approval of the agenda. May I please have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Francis, seconded by Councillor Crutch. And that approval is through show of hands. That carries. Thank you. On to item 4, declarations of interest. Colleagues, any to declare today? Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes of our previous meeting, which was held on July 3rd. Mover and seconder to adopt the previous minutes, Councillor Crutch, Councillor Wilson. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, you can vote in favor with the show of hands up. And that carries unanimously as well. On to items for information. First up is 7.1, GRA 25002, which is the City Enrichment Fund intake update. And may I first please have a mover and seconder, and then I'll ask for staff to provide a high-level overview. Thank you, Councillor Crutch, seconded by Councillor Francis. Thank you. Over to you.
Good afternoon. Through the chair, my name is Jessica Chase. I'm the Acting Director of Communications and Engagement. The report that's before you today is an annual report that we bring forward where we would look at any surplus funding. In this particular case, we have a surplus of just over $78,000 from past year, and the recommendation, as is standard practice, is that that would go back into the reserve in which it came from, which in this case is the Tax Stabilization Reserve. I am joined today I just want to acknowledge my colleagues here that are here, Monique Garwood, who is the business administrator, Andrea Carvello, who is the CEF advisor, and Rebecca Farrat, who is the grants coordinator. We'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you. Committee members, speakers list is open. Any questions on the information report? First up is Councillor Crutch.
Sorry, this is 002, this report, right? Right. And 001 is the one that outlined the $78,000 in funding, I believe. Are we on? Am I just missing something? I want to make sure we're talking about the same report.
Sorry, my apologies. Note the surplus, we're on 001? Oh, sorry. Through the chair, I apologize. I had the order of my reports inadvertently mixed up. So 002 is an information report that's before you. Thank you for catching it. I'd like to blame that on being a Monday morning, but I know we're now at 1 o'clock, so I think my excuse around blaming it on a Monday morning and not having coffee is probably past me at this point, so apologies. Report 002 is an information report that's before the grant subcommittee today. What this is to provide an update to the subcommittee around the process for CEF. We are currently right now going through the adjudication phase. I will highlight here in the report that while we still need to go through the adjudication phase, we have seen an increase in the requests for CEF grants, which is consistent with the trends that we have seen over the last couple of years. I will note in particular that we have seen an 9% increase in the total number of requests. We have a total request of $13.6 million, which is then a 4% increase in the total dollar amount of requests. So while the results of the adjudication are obviously still pending at this point, I will flag for committee that we do anticipate having some similar challenges that we've experienced in the last couple of years in terms of funding constraints, as we know that the needs in the community for CEF funding are continuing to outweigh the available funding.
Thank you for that overview. Councillor Crutch.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I had a couple tiny questions about this report. I'm just really grateful to see the data here and get some advanced understanding of the fact that these are still going up year over year. We saw that huge increase last year as a result of kind of that after pandemic effect at the height of the pandemic, seeing that big increase, and we're still seeing increases that are double what we saw in the previous year, so we're at 9%. When I look at the table, I see two areas where increases are most prevalent. both tables show the same higher increases, and those are in the areas of communities, culture, and heritage, and the areas of sports and active lifestyle. So I wonder if you could maybe just, for me, give us a sense of what that feels like and looks like, right? So, I mean, those are pretty broad categories. As a former juror, I understand vaguely what that means, but I really would like to understand if you could talk about the kinds of things you're seeing an increase in areas and what that looks like and is reflected in our community who's expressing a need.
Certainly. So just at a very high level through the chair, I will state that we are continuing to, I think, one, feel those impacts post-pandemic, even though it has been a number of years. But in terms of the specific needs that we're seeing in those particular sector areas, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Andrea Carvello, who can talk a little bit more around some of the specifics that she's seeing in those two particular areas.
Through the chair, Andrea Carvalho, advisor to CEF. Thank you for the question. We've been seeing in the communities, culture, and heritage area an increase in applications from both small and mid-sized organizations, many of whom represent cultural groups across the city, who are coming to us either to build capacity within their organization and for small one-time and ongoing events that really mark cultural significant moments, celebrate heritage, and really provide a space for groups to come together. And I would just add, in the sport and active lifestyles area, we are also seeing that program area grow quite a bit, and we have seen an increase in sports programming from equity-serving groups. Happy to report a growth in that area.
Thank you. And my second question is just about how we're understanding the long-term plan with respect to increasing funding for CEF to meet the demand. So if I recall correctly, and by all means, if I've got it wrong, just tell me so. But I believe the last time we had made a significant increase before the ones we're doing now, the planned ones we're doing now, was some years ago before the pandemic. We're now seeing that as a result of the pandemic and that large social shift, the increase of need, and of course, our mandate now to try and reach out more equity deserving groups and try and serve the community in a different kind of way. Do you think that the increases that we've approved in the last, I think it was a couple of years ago, or maybe last year, that we increased to CEF are going to meet the demand we even have here, or do you still feel like we're not quite going to get there yet and we're going to have to go back to that model still, even with the increase of apportioning amounts to certain groups based on what we have in terms of a limited group of funds?
Through the chair. So we have continued to see these increases for sure, and we are definitely hearing in the community that the needs are outweighing the available funding. So there was a motion that was passed back in 2022, I believe, to increase the grant amount year over year. But even with that increase, we are seeing some pressures within the program more broadly. We were fortunate last year that we were able to address some of those through bridge funding and appeal funding. But I do think there are some limitations to that as we don't have that reserve this year to be able to draw on. So we will, of course, then need to look at what is the available funding and make some recommendations back to this committee around what does that look like for the grants. So once we go through the adjudication process, we will take that away and look at what the formula is that we want to recommend in terms of funding for those agencies.
Thanks. And so just a quick comment for me. Based on what you've said, I think I understand that despite the fact that we're working still on that long-term plan to increase funding to get us to a place where we can meet the capacity the community is asking for, we're still not in a place where we're going to be able to fund all applications. We're not in a place where we can invite everybody new into the program. We're not in a place where we can help everybody who's a legacy holder. The multi-year plan we're working on is going to help us to address some of those needs, but we're still in a deficit position in terms of being able to fund everyone's asks. And so I appreciate you saying that. I think it's important for that clarity on the public record. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, we have Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for the overview. Just a few still learning foundational questions from me. If I could start from maybe the last point first. Has the city and the staff who work on this, has there been at any point a specific number where you believe that all community needs would be met? I'm just thinking about Councillor Cretch's question about capacity. Has there ever been a target provided? Through the chair.
Through the chair, I'm thinking back to 2022 when there was a motion put forward by the chair of the committee at the time, Councillor Johnson, who noted the increased total in that year at 9 million, which was a significant number compared to those previous years. And I believe that the target was then to reach that 9 million with enhancements year over year. So that's been the target that we've been looking back and referencing back. Last year and this year, our total requests are sitting at 13 million. This year it's 13.6. So we do recognize that as our target that we are working towards, but just noting that the total requests coming in already exceeds that amount.
Thank you. If you could just help me understand what went into informing that target, and I guess is this a thirst that can never be quenched, in that there'll forever be need in the community, whether people's start new groups, the cost continuously is always going to be enhancing due to matters of inflation, equipment, contracts. Could you just help me understand that through the chair?
Through the chair, in that year, groups were coming out of, well, I'll say they were still in the pandemic, but really coming out of increased requests and demand for programs and services. And I believe at that time, the committee looked at the total requests in 2022 as a reflection of where the community was at that time. And I believe for those reasons, they set that 9 million to match the requests that came in as our goal to try and help meet the community needs at the time and ongoing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So in 2022, if I've heard you correctly, it was deemed that the need was measured at 9 million and we should fund up in order to meet that. And now the need is at 13 million because no cost, I think, very few costs remain static. Okay, thank you. If I could just go back to a definitional question. Could you just explain to me the difference between arts and culture for funding purposes? Thank you. Those categories, thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, that's a great question. Within the arts program area, the criteria is to really focus on both professional and semi-professional arts organizations who are incorporated, whereas in the communities, culture, and heritage program area, the eligibility who we serve is much wider. So we are looking at cultural groups who represent certain areas, different cultures representing different countries, as well as more amateur groups who do perform and contribute to the arts sector, but whose organization is not incorporated. So they're while they are not-for-profits, their formatting is just slightly different.
Okay, thank you. I heard the ding, so I have 2 additional questions. Happy to go back on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other first-time speakers? Seeing none, I'll move the chair to Councillor Cretch as vice. And through you, Vice Chair, first of all, just thank you to staff. I know that what we've been working on over the last 6 years in terms of process improvement, systemic overhaul, right-sizing the program has been a iterative and ongoing path. And so I really appreciate staff's consistency in moving us along to those measures. And one point that I wanted to draw out from this report is the piece about the October 1st to November 15th period, having a lot of positive community feedback in terms of those new standards and setting the future intake period accordingly, and as well as the more robust, I think, community engagement, as well as dialogue with our applicants about, if you're going to apply, these are things to consider. And really, I've heard back from those smaller organizations who never thought that they were going to be a contender when it comes to CEF, that they felt much more competent and also supported to bring their applications forward, given the frontline support that they do deliver in our communities across the city. So just wanted to say, I know process work is always iterative and ongoing, and staff do it behind the scenes, but it's these kinds of moments that I think it deserves to be given some shine. So thank you for your ongoing diligence there. I'll take back the chair and Councillor Wilson for your last two questions.
Thank you. Again, just a base understanding question through the chair. When you were speaking to the item of culture and heritage, you talked about increase in small and medium-sized groups, culture groups. The money was to build capacity. Could you just help me understand, when you use the phrase build capacity, are we measuring the grant money being affixed to service outcome, or can part of it be used for administrative infrastructure? Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you for the question.
You're welcome.
Within the community's culture and heritage area, we do serve programs that are quite different. So we do have event-based programs, some more service-based, and within each of our streams, we do support administrative requests along with public-facing program requests that ensure that program can be feasible and successful. Within the community's culture and heritage area, we do have 3 streams that we fund within, or excuse me, 2 streams, events and established activities, and a second stream, new projects that really look to support organizations bringing forward a new project that may be drawn from requests from their membership, what they've heard from community, allowing them to be nimble in the way that they program and serve for their community.
Thank you very much. So just so I understand, we don't have any rules in terms of where the money, it can be spent at, I think you used the term front-facing servicing, or the monies can be spent to enhancing, or in some cases, enhancing, assisting the development of the administrative structure of a particular group, and we don't have, it's not our business, or we're not in the business of measuring how much of their overall budget is going towards the administrative. Could you just help me out on that? I appreciate it.
Sure. Through the chair, I'll just go back to when an applicant comes forward, specifically in this area, they're presenting a specific program to us, and we look to review, of course, the budget within that program, some of which is very public-facing, especially when we're looking at many events, again, and member-based, public-based programming. And some of that does include some minor administrative elements that are related to and in support of that specific program that they are requesting funding for. So we do have eligibility criteria and budget criteria that is applied across all of CEF, and then each program area also has very specific budget elements that are applicable and some that are not applicable within each area. And so we really do review those budget pieces to ensure that what's coming forward, whether, of course, that's public facing, if it's more administrative or tech, that it all fits within the eligible criteria. Most of what we fund within Communities, Culture, and Heritage is for public-facing programming and services.
Okay, I think I'll take this out offline. If I just, thank you for that. In terms of the sport and active lifestyle, could you educate me, is there a distinction made between, how shall I say, if there was a youth sport group, does it have to be incorporated? I'm just trying to see if there's a distinction between groups that may be heavily funded from the bank of somewhere else versus those groups that are totally community dependent. Thank you. And if I have to go offline with this, happy to, but if you're able to provide a high level, that would be great.
Through the chair, Rebecca Farrat, Grants Coordinator. There are 7 different streams within the sports and active lifestyle program area. And within those streams, they each have different goals or objectives that they're looking to accomplish. So, for example, the accessibility stream is looking to make sports and active lifestyles more accessible to folks who maybe generally wouldn't necessarily be able to access those programs. There's also programs such as our Active for Life program, which tends to target seniors or young folks who are looking to get involved. The organizations are not required to be incorporated in the sports and active lifestyle stream. We do fund unincorporated groups with not-for-profit goals and structure. And the way that we define that is that they are required to have a form of board of directors, even if they're not formally incorporated, as well as have some financial structure in place as an organization. That is not the case across all of the City Enrichment Fund. There are very specific program areas where those unincorporated groups are able to apply, such as Communities, Culture, and Heritage we were discussing earlier, and sports and active lifestyles. In terms of which sports are funded particularly, it very much depends on who applies in a given year, but we do see a pretty wide range of different activities that have come in through sports and active lifestyles in the recent years, including we've seen, as Andrea mentioned earlier, more diverse focused sports and active lifestyles programs that are targeting equity-seeking communities and equity-deserving communities.
Super helpful. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other questions on this report? Seeing none, it's been duly moved and seconded and before committee for approval. Or receipt, sorry. Show of hands. Oh, geez, Louise, I will catch up to the procedural changes. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Onwards to item 8, which are items for consideration. First up is 8.1, which we already received a high-level overview on, GRA Report 25001. So we've got 78,000 or thereabouts in surplus going to the Tax Stabilization Reserve. May I please get a mover and seconder so we can have a discussion? Councillor Crutch, seconded by Councillor Taddison. Thank you. Speakers list is open. Councillor Crutch.
I think that's really just a very simple question to ask about this. With this tension, obviously, in this idea that there's a surplus, but that we need more money, right? So I know the report touches on it, but if you could unpack that a little bit in terms of how that works, that would be helpful.
Through the chair. So typically, and I mean, each organization situation may be different, but where we often do see the surpluses that exist, it's because there has been a change in the program's ability to perhaps deliver, or a change because we fund specific programs. If they're not able to deliver on that specific program for extenuating circumstances, they do bubble up from time to time. That's typically where we would see some of these surplus funding, and then that would typically go back into the reserve.
Thanks, and so if I understand this, I think I do, what happens is the program says, hey, we need $30,000 to run our programming, and you say, okay, you're approved for that amount of money, and it's a third of your costs, wonderful. And they go away and say, oh, it only costs us 23. We have 7,000 left. You can't reallocate that back in time because a new application process has already begun. So your way of dealing with that is putting it back in the reserve and then keeping it for future years for the commitments people need. So thanks for that. I just wanted that to be explained, I think, out loud, just simply because automatically it feels like a tension, and the tension is not real. So thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you, Councillor Cratch. If you can hang on to the microphone, I'll pass the chair to you if there's no other first-time speakers. Through you, just wanted to clarify. So in previous years, having the privilege of serving for 6 years on the Grants Committee, subcommittee, we have had scenarios where we have offset the impact by applying any surpluses or return funds directly to the next round. So I know it's not a lot of money, it's $75,000, and I think about $50,000 in returns as well. From staff's perspective, is that a viable path forward?
Through the chair, I'll start on this response, but Monique, if there's anything from a financial perspective, she may wish to add to my response as well. So we have recommended that it go back to tax stabilization because it's standard practice that funds be returned to where they came from, which in this case was the tax stabilization reserve, because you'll recall there was a motion passed that we had bridge funding that first came out of the CF reserve and then came out of tax stabilization. However, we have put forward as an alternative for this committee's consideration the ability to redirect those funds back to the CEF reserve as an alternative.
And that's within this report. Thank
It
you.
is within the report as an alternative.
Thank you. Nothing to add, nothing more to, sorry, you're chairing, not me. Councillor Cratch? Yeah. Okay, so staff are confirming that that alternative is available for subcommittees to consider. I think at the appropriate time, I'd like to roll that up. It does help reduce some of the impact, though not significantly, in terms of our multi-year strategy to right-size our target, bringing us to 9 million versus the 13 million. But at the appropriate time, either if there's a committee member that would like to move that, I think we've been working quite collaboratively as a subcommittee throughout the term, so I don't need to do it as chair. And I would turn to my committee colleagues if there's anybody who might be interested in moving that alternative. So I just wanted to raise that up for committee's consideration. It's about 100,000 plus if we're putting both the return, no, that was a clarifying question that I had. So it would only be the surplus funds that are available for alternative, not the return checks.
Through the chair, it's the total amount, the $78,000.
Thank you. Okay, so I will take back the chair. I think I've said enough for committee to consider. Okay. Any other speakers? Okay. Seeing no interest to move that, Councillor Cratch?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that if you don't want to do it, so it's okay for me to do
It's
so.
not a want situation. I just wanted to make sure that committee was engaged in the process and what we're deliberating here.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I'm happy to, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Tattison. Thank you both. Okay, so the motion to include the alternate recommendation into the consideration items from staff is on the table. Speakers list is open for the alternative consideration. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take that as general agreement around, oh, Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you. My apologies. I should have been following this more closely. So we have a surplus. It came from tax stabilization. The practice has been to return it to the source it came from, and the rationale for deviating from that is, could I just seek clarity? Thank you.
Certainly, Councillor, so what I was providing in historical practice is that on occasion, we have, as a grant subcommittee, use those surpluses and not return them to the tax stabilization, and instead applied those surpluses to the funding envelope altogether. Yeah, and Councillor Jackson is confirming non-verbally in terms of that historical record, but over to staff. Any other further comments? Monique, thank you.
Through the chair to the councillor. So 2024 was our heavy demand on our reserve, the CEF reserve, and so we did dip into the tax stabilization to offset some of those additional funding requirements. And past practice has been to return it to the reserve that it came from. So in this case, it would be the tax stabilization reserve. In the past, it has gone back to the CEF reserve because we've never had to go outside of our reserve, but that reserve fund has been depleted.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I appreciate that background. Thank you.
No further speakers? Oh, Councillor Jackson, my apologies.
Not at all, Chair Nan, and welcome back. We miss you. So can I just get clear? The 78 grand, one way or the other, is staying with CEF. One way or the other, whether it's back into our reserve, whether it's back into our actual fund, or is the recommendation to go back into tax stabilization generally? Can I get that clarified, please, Chair Nan, through you to either Manager Garwood or whoever, Director Chase?
Through the chair to the councillor. So the recommendation from staff is to return it to the tax stabilization reserve. The alternative is to put it to the City Enrichment Fund reserve, which is where we had always put CEF surpluses, but this funding came from the tax stabilization reserve.
Thank you, Manager Garwood. I want to go to our CEF reserve. So if that's the motion on the floor, enthusiastic gusto support from Ward 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. No further speakers? Okay, it's before committee for vote.
So just to be clear, it'll be a vote, an electronic vote for this one, and on the floor is that it be transferred to the CEF reserve.
Correct.
And that's what you're voting on. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the vote is up. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so on to 8.2, which is amendments to the outstanding business list. Can I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Francis, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Any questions? Seeing none, then it is before committee for approval. That carries unanimously. And on to adjournment. No further business. This meeting's adjourned. Ha, no vote. Like that. Thank you to staff for all your support and prep for the meeting today, as well as to the clerk staff for your assistance today. Thank you.